Badlands, running to Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, everybody. I want to make sure that this is working. If you can hear me in the chat, can you let me know? I can check myself. Okay, there we go. Cool. We're good to go. Yeah, welcome everybody. We're doing the recap series, part 5. I know last time we did part 6. I wanted to skip this one and come back to it just because we were taking over a defected slot on the last stream, and that was gonna be a much better discussion. I don't think this one would have evolved into quite the discussion that we had, but yeah, it's been a little while since I've done this. I told you guys on the last stream that I would kind of give you a little insight into some of my personal life and why I am running daddy daycare now. And so I do still plan on doing that after the stream, although I do have to go pick up my kids in about 2 hours. So we're going to try to cruise through this. The video of part 5 is about 36 minutes long. And so with me stopping it and adding commentary and stuff, we'll see how long it takes. But this should be a fun one. I am this was one of the articles where when I was researching and I came across this information, it was like the first time that I was actually like scared of publishing an article. Like, I mean, I was always nervous for having Patrick read it and excited, but that was like more of an excited nervousness, where this was like more like, oh my gosh, what if I'm doing something I shouldn't be? They're gonna, Hillary Clinton me, whatever, Epstein me. Probably a little naive, but again, at the time I was new into this, I didn't know. But the information here, very relevant to our election system. And I am curious, having not read through this article in like 2+ years, or whatever it's been. This came out July 22nd. So it's been almost 3 years since this article was written, July 22nd of 2021. I'm curious how much my mind will go to the Chevron deference that was just overturned on a recent Power Hour. I was discussing how I think that could play an effect, and maybe that's why the whole media freakout happened. They don't have the same power to steal elections. I don't know, but I know this is very heavy in the 3-letter agency stuff. It's also very convoluted. There's a lot of like, the United States code referring you to other United States code. It gets confusing, but it's still good information to have. If there was ever an article you wanted to send somebody just to show them how convoluted and how stupid our election system is set up to be, this would be the one to do it. So let's get right into it. We got the OG Patrick Gunnels. He's going to read it for us, and we'll kick it off right now.
Devolution, Part 5. The Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency and Dominion Voting Systems. The previous installments 1 through 4 are available at patelpatriot.substack.com. Critical infrastructure. President Harry Truman created the National Security Council, NSC, in 1947. Since its founding, every president has issued some form of national security directives. National security directives are usually directed only to the NSC and senior executive branch officials and lay out foreign and military policy-making guidance. Bill Clinton's presidential directive, PDD-63 of May 1998, started including extensive critical infrastructure protection, CIP. PDD-63 mandated the formation of a national strategy for CIP. In the wake of the September 11th terrorist attacks, numerous changes took place regarding how we define and operate our CIP. The Patriot Act was signed into law on October 26, 2001, and gave the following definition for critical infrastructure. In this section, the term critical infrastructure means systems and assets, whether physical or virtual, so vital to the United States that the incapacity or destruction of such systems and assets would have a debilitating impact on security, national economic security, national public health or safety, or any combination of those matters. The following year, November 25th, 2002, the Homeland Security Act was signed into law, creating the United States Department of Homeland Security. In 2003, President George W. Bush signed the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 7, HSPD 7, which replaced PDD 63 and established the U.S. national policy for identification of and prioritization of critical infrastructure. HSPD 7 called for the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, NIPP, which aims to unify critical infrastructure and key resource protection efforts across the country, CI/KR. The NIPP's goals are to protect critical infrastructure and key resources and ensure resiliency. It was not an actual plan to be carried out in an emergency, but it was useful as a mechanism for developing coordination between government and the private sector.
So what's already interesting to me and what's sticking out is all of these, presidential policy directive stuff, because when we get further into the series, that comes up quite a bit. You think PPD 40, which is the continuity of government one that Obama put out, which in Devolution Part 13, that executive order 13961 is what altered that a little bit. And then also with Trump leaving office, those 10 NSPMs in his last 10 days, it's just very interesting. All of the stuff at this time was in the wake of 9/11, having to do with ensuring resiliency and responding to debilitating attacks on the country. And this is what they were doing, was using these national security directives and implementing measures to safeguard or respond to such things. And this NIPP was structured and created. So that's what's sticking out right now for me.
The NIPP, NIP, is structured to create partnerships between government coordinating councils, GCC, from the public sector and sector coordinating councils, SCC, from the private sector. I want to again emphasize that the SCCs are from the private sector, sector coordinating councils from the private sector. Here is the National Infrastructure Protection Plan. Protecting the critical infrastructure and key resources, CI/KR, of the United States is essential to the nation's security, public health and safety, economic vitality, and way of life. Attacks on CI/KR could significantly disrupt the functioning of government and business alike and produce cascading effects far beyond the targeted sector and physical location of the incident. Direct terrorist attacks and natural, man-made, or technological hazards could produce catastrophic losses in terms of human casualties, property destruction, and economic effects, as well as profound damage to public morale and confidence. Attacks using components of the nation's critical infrastructure or key resources as weapons of mass destruction could have even more devastating physical and psychological consequences. The overarching goal of the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, NIP, is to build a safer, more secure, and more resilient America by enhancing protection of the nation's CI/KR to prevent, deter, neutralize, or mitigate the effects of deliberate efforts by terrorists to destroy, incapacitate, or exploit them, and to strengthen national preparedness, timely response, and rapid recovery in the event of an attack, natural disaster, or other emergency. The NIP provides the unifying structure for the integration of existing and future CI/KR protection efforts into a single national program to achieve this goal. The NIP framework will enable the prioritization of protection initiatives and investments across sectors to ensure that government and private sector resources, note the emphasis, are applied where they offer the most benefit for mitigating risk by lessening vulnerabilities.
I just started giggling because of how many times we just heard Patrick say NIP. I don't know why, very immature sometimes, I guess. But again, this whole thing is our government responding to attacks on our critical infrastructure and key resources that could significantly disrupt the functioning of our government. And so later, as we see, I believe we'll get into it here, where it was Jay Johnson who in 2017, January of 2017, right before Trump took office, he added our election infrastructure to that critical infrastructure. And so attacks on that or interruptions in that, I mean, that all fits the definition. And that's so key to the entire Devolution series. So just very notable there.
The NIP also discussed implementing advisory councils, shown below. These councils have been used as a method to involve the private sector in matters of national security relating to critical infrastructure. 2.2.6 Advisory councils. Advisory councils provide advice, recommendations, and expertise to the government regarding CIKR protection policy and activities. These entities also help enhance public-private partnerships and information sharing. They often provide an additional mechanism to engage with a pre-existing group of private sector leaders to obtain feedback on CIKR protection policy and programs, and to make suggestions to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of specific government programs. Examples of CIKR protection-related advisory councils and their associated responsibilities include Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, CIPAC. CIPAC is a partnership between government and private sector CIKR owners and operators that facilitates effective coordination of federal CIKR protection programs. CIPAC engages in a range of CIKR protection activities such as planning, coordination, NIP implementation, and operational activities, including incident response, recovery, and reconstitution. The Department of Homeland Security published a Federal Register notice on March 24th, 2006, announcing the establishment of CIPAC as a Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, exempt body pursuant to Section 871 of the Homeland Security Act.
Okay, I just want to point out there something that just stood out because it sounded very continuity of government-ish, where he read that NIP implementation, or sorry, CIPAC engages in a range of CIKR, critical infrastructure key resources, protection activities such as planning, coordination, NIP implementation, and operational activities, including incident response, recovery, and reconstitution. Reconstitution is a continuity of government term. It comes after something like devolution is implemented. You implement the continuity of government plan as it's ongoing, whatever specific plan it is. I believe devolution is currently playing out. And then once we get through that phase and you return to normal activities or whatever that looks like, that's what the reconstitution phase is after it's been completed. And so it's interesting that that term is used here. I'd have to dig a little more to see if it's used in that same context or not. But anyway, let's keep going because this part is very important, showing the shenanigans here.
See Chapter 4. Remember that highlighted part. Read it twice if you have to. The formation of this Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, CIPAC, as FACA exempt is crucial, and I'll explain why later. Let's do it again, guys. DHS published a Federal Register notice on March 24th, 2006, announcing the establishment of CIPAC as a Federal Advisory Committee Act exempt body pursuant to Section 871 of the Homeland Security Act. One more thing regarding membership of CIPAC. The specific membership of the CIPAC will consist of A, the critical infrastructure / key resources owners and operators that are members of their respective sectors' recognized sector coordinating council, including their representative trade or equivalent organizations, SCC CIPAC members, and B, federal, state, local, and tribal government entities comprising the members of the Government Coordinating Council, GCC, for each sector, including their representative trade or equivalent organizations, GCC CIPAC members. Again, I want to emphasize that membership of the CIPAC will consist of the critical infrastructure / key resource owners and operators that are members of their respective sectors recognized SCC. What does any of this have to do with the 2020 election?
Guys, I know this is so confusing, the terms, the phrases, but the key points are all of this was set up to protect our critical infrastructure. We're about to get into our election infrastructure being added to that. And then the reason it's so significant that the membership of the SIPAC, and especially the sector coordinating council, it's the owners and operators themselves. Like, that's what's so key about this whole article, is who is implementing the cybersecurity of our elections and all these things. It's the same people that we believe to be stealing our elections, right? This whole thing is so crazy, but let's keep going.
Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. On January 6th, 2017, Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson, Obama's SHS, released a statement designating election infrastructure as a critical infrastructure subsector within the existing critical infrastructure sector titled Government Facilities. This allowed election infrastructure security to fall under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security.
You know, this is an interesting one, because we know around this time frame is when Obama, he was doing a lot of stuff as they were going out the door. We had the Russiagate hoax being started and perpetrated, which he knew about. There's stuff with how the social media companies were censoring people. Like, that's where a lot of those small groups were started. It was on his order. I think it was the Schellenberger files, even though I'm not a big fan of him himself. The information he presented was pretty darn good. And there's something in there, a quote, where there's like this British, former British, I don't even remember what special forces they have over there or whatever, spy. She was saying that she was part of this group in the formation of it. It was on Obama's order, and it was right around this time frame. So all these things going to basically undermine and work against Trump were being formulated right before Obama left office, right around the time when our election infrastructure was named as critical infrastructure. And the reason I said that's confusing to me is because when I look at this move by Jay Johnson here, designating election infrastructure as critical infrastructure, that's actually a really key move in terms of Trump defending our elections and implementing something like devolution. Now, fast forward a little bit, we're about to get into this, where the CISA was created. CISA, like, Trump didn't create CISA. It was an act. Congress passed it. Trump signed it. So it did get created under Trump. And we know CISA has been up to some mad shenanigans these last few years, and especially with the election. And so maybe that was the long-term goal with designating election infrastructure as critical infrastructure, so that they could formulate CISA and then do all the bad shit that they did. And it's probably just as simple as that. I'm maybe overthinking it. But I do know that move also benefited Trump when it comes to implementing devolution.
On November 16th, 2018, President Trump signed into law the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act of 2018, which established the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, CISA, according to their own website. Quote, "The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, is the nation's risk advisor, working with partners to defend against today's threats and collaborating to build more secure and resilient infrastructure for the future," end quote. The CISA website lists all 16 of the critical infrastructure sectors, but I want to focus on the government facilities sector, because that is where you can find the election infrastructure subsector. The election infrastructure subsector landing page looks like this.
One thing I want to point out too that I think is kind of interesting about CISA is, I know back when I first started following Thomas Wichter over on, I think it was still on Twitter, before everybody got booted over to quote Verum or whatever, everybody was like, he's got this. It's CISA. Trump created CISA. CISA is going to be the ones that doesn't let this happen. And so how wrong we were, right? I mean, everybody had this wrong. Like, they are deep state through and through. And even like through writing the series, there were times where I'm like, God, maybe, I don't know. Maybe he just, Krebs just allowed this stuff to happen so they could catch it. It's getting harder and harder to believe that. But it's just interesting. Like, perspectives change as more information comes to light. That's always been the case. And that's with everything. And this is one of those things where perspective has changed a little bit. But again, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing, because the election infrastructure being labeled as critical infrastructure is everything in terms of devolution. Not everything, but it's a huge part of it. But it also was what allowed them to move this under the DHS and one of those 3-letter agencies and subvert the entire election process, which is totally what they did. So it's a double-edged sword in that regard.
Government facilities sector, election infrastructure subsector, charters and membership. Here is the 2020 Charter, Election Infrastructure Subsector Government Coordinating Council, Charter 2-9-2020, February 9th, 2020, CISA.gov, as shown above. Remember, from before, I told you that Sector Coordinating Councils, SCC, are from the private sector and are members of Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, CIPAC. Section 1, Official Designation. This charter has been developed as a dynamic document intended to clarify and inform the organizational structures, function, and operating procedures for the organization to be known as the Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council, abbreviated as the EISCC. Section 2, Mission and Purpose. The mission of the Council is to advance the physical security, cybersecurity, and emergency preparedness of the nation's election infrastructure in accordance with existing U.S. law. This mission will be accomplished through voluntary actions of the infrastructure owners and operators represented in the Council as set forth in the Presidential Policy Directive, PPD-21, and related authorities. The EISCC will serve as the principal asset owner interface with other private critical infrastructure sectors, as well as with the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, the state, local, and tribal governments, and the Election Infrastructure Subsector Government Coordinating Council, GCC. Section 3, Objectives and Scope of Activity. The key objectives of the EISCC are to serve as the primary liaison between the election subsector and federal, state, and local agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, concerning private election subsector security and emergency preparedness issues. Facilitate sharing of information and intelligence about physical and cyber threats, vulnerabilities, incidents, and potential protective measures. Coordinate with DHS and the EISGCC to develop, recommend, and review sector-wide plans, procedures, and effective practices in support of infrastructure protection, including training, education, and implementation. Represent the election subsector in discussions with other infrastructure sectors, as well as with the EISGCC on matters of threat, security, risk analysis, emergency preparedness and response, and other related matters. Identify and communicate priorities, obstacles, or impediments to effective critical infrastructure security and resilience protection programs, and develop, recommend to appropriate authorities actions to mitigate them. Provide a mechanism to ensure that the specialized knowledge and expertise of sector operators, owners, and other pertinent representatives is available as a resource. The EISCC is not designed to create the terms of any solicitation or contract vehicle, and any appearance of its use or actual use to this end could bar an entity involved therein from competition in the contract.
I forgot how dense this information was. Like crazy shit. But we're about to get into we're going to sum up exactly everything he just read there, what they essentially do, and then we're going to get into the details, I believe, of that, the framework that they operate under and what they're exempt from, which is what, again, makes this whole thing so damn corrupt.
Essentially, the EISCC is a council made up of members from the private sector that advises and assists our government with election security. They coordinate with the DHS to develop, recommend, and review sector-wide plans, procedures, and effective practices in support of infrastructure protection, including training, education, and implementation. They also make recommendations to appropriate authorities to mitigate impediments to effective critical infrastructure security. Section 5 of the Charter is critical. Focus on the first paragraph below, quote, "The EISCC operates under the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, CIPAC, framework established by the Department of Homeland Security pursuant to Section 871 of the Homeland Security Act of 2002, 6 United States Code, subsection 451. What exactly is Section 871 of the Homeland Security Act of 2002, 6 United States Code, subsection 451? Section 871, advisory committees. A, in general, the Secretary of Homeland Security may establish, appoint members of, and use the services of advisory committees as the Secretary may deem necessary. An advisory committee established under this section may be exempted by the Secretary from Public Law 92-463, but the Secretary shall publish notice in the Federal Register announcing the establishment of such a committee and identifying its purpose and membership. Notwithstanding the preceding sentence, members of an advisory committee that is exempted by the Secretary under the preceding sentence who are special government employees, as that term is defined in Section 202 of Title 18 United States Code, shall be eligible for certifications under subsection B3 of Section 208 of Title 18 United States Code for official actions taken as a member of such advisory committee. So, the EISCC may be exempted by the Secretary of Homeland Security from Public Law 92-463, screenshot below, and that law establishes, quote, a system governing the creation and operation of advisory committees. Here we go. Public Law 92-463, to authorize the establishment of a system governing the creation and operation of advisory committees in the executive branch of the federal government and for other purposes. What this means is because the EISCC operates within the CIPAC framework, Section 871 says they are exempt from government oversight. So, to sum up so far, DHS has submitted a notice in the Federal Registry in 2006, renewed every 2 years, that CIPAC is exempt from oversight over its creation and operation of advisory committees. The EISCC is operating under the framework of CIPAC. Therefore, the EISCC is exempt from oversight over its creation and operation. Now, back to Section 871. Just the highlighted part.
I mean, this is insane, guys. It's like pissing me off even more as I'm rereading this again. Again, it's been 3 years since I've written this, and pretty much any time that Patrick reads the article, that's basically the last time that I go back to it, unless something sparks in my head during a show and I'll try to recall it or whatever. But I forgot how disgusting this whole system is, the way it's set up. But let's keep going. I'll have more comments on it as we go.
Members of an advisory committee that is exempted by the Secretary under the preceding sentence who are special government employees, as that term is defined in Section 202 of Title 18 United States Code. Here is Section 202 of Title 18 United States Code. Any independent agency of the United States or of the District of Columbia. So here we go. For the purpose of Sections 203, 205, 207, 208, and 209 of this title, the term special government employee shall mean an officer or employee of the executive or legislative branch of the United States government or any independent agency of the United States or of the District of Columbia who is retained, designated, appointed, or employed to perform with or without compensation for not to exceed 130 days during any period of 365 consecutive days, temporary duties either on a full-time or intermittent basis, a part-time United States Commissioner, a part-time United States Magistrate Judge, or, regardless of the number of days of appointment, an independent counsel appointed under Chapter 40 of Title 28, and any person appointed by that independent counsel under Section 594C of Title 28. Notwithstanding the next preceding sentence, every person serving as a part-time, local representative of a member of Congress in the member's home district or state shall be classified as a special government employee. All right, we'll skip to the rest.
Thank you.
So membership in SIPAC results in members of the EISCC being classified as special government employees. Back to Section 871. Quote, shall be eligible for certifications under subsection B3 of Section 208 of Title 18 United States Code for official actions taken as a member of such advisory committee. Subsection B3 of Section 208 of Title 18 United States Code reads as follows. 3. In the case of a special government employee on an advisory committee within the meaning of the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, including an individual being considered for an appointment to such a position, the official responsible for the employee's appointment after review of the financial disclosure report filed by the individual pursuant to the Ethics in Government Act of 1978 certifies in writing that the need for the individual's services outweighs the potential for a conflict of interest created by the financial interest involved. So, not only are members of the EISCC exempt from oversight, but they are also considered special government employees, and they have been certified that their services outweigh the potential for a conflict of interest created by the financial interest involved. So, our government knows there is a potential for conflict of interest created by the financial interests involved for members of the EISCC. Yet they get to operate without oversight. Why is this so important? Scroll down and check.
Before we get into that, I still cannot believe that this is actually a thing. I understand the importance of, public sector, private sector integration and doing things. Like, there are some things that the private sector can do better. There are some things, I guess there's probably literally nothing that the government can do better. So scratch that last part. But the fact that they are not only exempt from oversight, and maybe that's the most important part. Like, I get that there's financial interest involved there. That should require the oversight. Like, it shouldn't be both. Like, if you're going to be exempt from oversight, then you should have no potential conflict of interest financially. But if you do have any conflict of interest financially, there should be rigorous oversight. It should be the most oversight. That's what's insane here. The way this is set up, and it's so convoluted. This is the most convoluted thing you're probably ever going to read, because every specific United States Code law refers you to another one, and it's all such bullshit. But they do this on purpose, and it's not just with this, it's everywhere. But they do this so that it's impossible to understand, it's impossible to find, and like nobody even knows this stuff exists. Nobody talks about this. I haven't even talked about this in like 3 years, which is crazy. But the fact that we have members who we're about to go through that operate the cybersecurity of our elections and all that shit, they are financially they financially have a conflict of interest, and they have no oversight, and that is just totally unacceptable. And it's not surprising in the slightest. Our government sucks, but it's just awful.
Check out the member affiliations of the Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council, EISCC's 2020 charter. Try not to shit your pants. I will do my best, sir. 1, member affiliations. Members of the EISCC include entities, companies, organizations, or components thereof, whose services, systems, product, or technology are used by or on behalf of state or local government in administering the U.S. election process. Such entities should have demonstrable working relationships with federal, state, or local election officials, which may include verifiable registration/accreditation with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and or relevant contractual relationships with SLTT, state and local, tribal governments, election offices. Entities whose primary assets are election related may be considered for membership. Each member representative shall serve until the end of their tenure with their appointing entity or until the entity self-reports a change in its representation. The members of the EISCC can remove a member on 2/3 vote of the full membership. Organizing members, oh my God. Organizing members of the EISCC include, just make sure, the Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council's 2020 charter. Organizing members are the Associated Press Elections, BPRO, Clear Ballot Group, Crosscheck, Democracy Live, Democracy Works, Demtech Voting Solutions, Dominion Voting Systems, ElectTech Election Services, Election Systems and Software, ES&S, Electronic Registration and Information Center, Everyone Counts, Heart Intercivic, Microvote General Corp, PCC Technology Inc., ProVNV, Runbeck Election Services, CITL, SLI Compliance, Smartmatic, 10X Software Solutions, Unison Voting Solutions, Votech, Votem, VR Systems. Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic were two of the members of the EISCC which advises and assists our government with election security by coordinating with the DHS to develop, recommend, and review sector-wide plans, procedures, and effective practices in support of infrastructure protection, including training, education, and implementation, while also making recommendations to appropriate authorities to mitigate impediments to effective critical infrastructure security. Our government knew there was a conflict of interest because they had to sign a waiver certifying they knew, yet they were allowed to assist in our election without oversight. These are the same two companies that have been at the center of the 2020 election fraud. If you haven't yet, read this article from the Epoch Times showing a history of foreign ties behind voting machines used in the US. Not only did they advise and assist our government with election security without oversight, our government knew about it because they renewed the charter which allowed it on November 30th, 2018 for an additional 2 years, carrying them through November 30th, 2020. On November 30th, 2018, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen M. Nielsen, signed a renewal of the SciPac charter for an additional 2 years.
It's honestly kind of funny. I know some people either love or hate Patrick, right? Like the way he just kind of wears his emotion on his sleeve and just says it like it is. But watching him get more pissed off as he's reading this, I think is perfect, because that's how you should feel. And I think that's how everybody feels about this. It's insane that the companies that we believe stole our election, that if you remember the draft executive order, which we'll get to when we get to an addendum one of these days, I think it's addendum 4. I mean, that'll be a while from now, but that draft executive order from December 16th, Trump listed Smartmatic and Dominion in there and how they stole the election. And it was, rife with foreign interference. Those are the same companies that are advancing the physical security, cybersecurity, and emergency preparedness of our election infrastructure without oversight. And our government knows that there is a financial conflict of interest involved. This whole thing is bullshit.
Sheds new light on this statement from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which was released on November 12th, 2020. Joint statement from Elections Infrastructure Government Coordinating Council and the Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Executive Committees. Wow.
Let me see if you read.
Washington.
Okay, so as he's reading through this, what I want you guys to think of is the agencies here, and then Chevron. The stuff I mentioned on the Power Hour not long ago about, does the overturning of Chevron potentially affect anything to do with our elections? Again, I don't know. I still have not had the time to dig into that stuff specifically. I hope to get to that eventually, maybe in a week or two. Literally, like, if you stick around a little bit for the locals after this, I'll try my best to explain why things are so nuts for me right now. But anyway, keep that in mind and think of any of these 3-letter things: CISA, the NASED, the EAC, all these things. These could potentially be affected by this Chevron deference ruling? And how will that affect future election challenges, or maybe past ones overturning ones? I don't know, but something to keep in mind.
The members of Election Infrastructure Government Coordinating Council, GCC, Executive Committee, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, Assistant Director Bob Kolaski, U.S. Election Assistance Commission Chair Benjamin Hovland, National Association of Secretaries of State, President Maggie Toulouse-Oliver, National Association of State Election Directors, President Lori Alguino, and Escambia County, Florida Supervisor of Elections, David Stafford, and the members of the Election Infrastructure Sector Coordinating Council, Chair Brian Hancock, Unison Voting Solutions, Vice Chair Sam Durheimer, Hart Intercivic, Chris Wolashin, Election Systems and Software, Erica Haas, Election Registration Information Center, and Maria Bianchi, Democracy Works, released the following statement. The November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. Right now, across the country, election officials are reviewing and double-checking the entire election process prior to finalizing the result. When states have close elections, many will recount ballots. All of the states with close results in the 2020 presidential race have paper records of such vote, allowing the ability to go back and count each ballot if necessary. This is an added benefit for security and resilience. This process allows for the identification and correction of any mistakes or errors. There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. Other security measures, like pre-election testing, state certification of voting equipment, and the U.S. Election Assistance Commission's EAC certification of voting equipment, help to build additional confidence in the voting systems used in 2020. While we know there are many unfounded claims and opportunities for misinformation about the process of our elections, we can assure you we have the utmost confidence in the security and integrity of our elections, and you should too. When you have questions, turn to elections officials as trusted voices as they administer elections. End quote. Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic, the very companies accused of committing fraud in this election, were part of the group who released the statement claiming the November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. On November 30th, 2020, the Department of Homeland Security renewed the charter again for 2 more years. And with that renewal came the straw that broke the election fraud's back. If you go back to the main election infrastructure subsector charters and membership landing page and click on the link for the 2021 version of the charter, which was released in February, you'll notice something different. They changed the name from Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council, EISCC, to Election Infrastructure Subsector Government Coordinating Council, EISGCC. Article 1, official designation. The official designation of this council is the Election Infrastructure Subsector Government Coordinating Council, hereinafter referred to as the EISGCC or the Council. They have also removed the entire list of private sector members, and it now reads that EISGCC membership is composed of government agencies and organizations representing government officials that own, operate, or administer subsector, physical, or cyber assets, systems, and processes, or have responsibility for supporting security and resilience of those assets, systems, and processes. No mention of Dominion or...
Well, what they did here was on the website, the link, they removed the EIS Sector Coordinating Council and only had the Government Coordinating Council, which I thought was interesting. That was probably a little over dramatic the way I wrote it this way, but it's still notable because it wasn't there anymore. But also, many of the links in my articles now have been removed. I've noticed, like a majority of them. I get notified all the time of, hey man, this hyperlink that you had in your article, which at the time of writing this, and if you read this, Patrick usually verifies it. They existed. They were there. And that's where I got the screenshots from. I wasn't smart enough at the time to archive everything, like archive all the links. Some of them were already, but the genuine ones in here have been removed, a lot of them.
Smartmatic, no mention of the private sector at all. Can you say cover up? Where is Congress asking questions about this? Closing. Everything about the 2020 election points to fraudulent activity. The Arizona Senate has subpoenaed the routers from the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, but the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors has not been cooperating. Why haven't they turned over the routers? The Arizona forensic auditors need to see internet traffic on those routers to see if anything nefarious took place and to finalize their audit. Refer back to the previously mentioned Epoch Times article and check out this screenshot below from that article. Staple Street Capital, a private equity firm located in New York, purchased Dominion in 2018, according to a press release. The securities firm that arranged the transaction, UBS Securities LLC, is a division of UBS Americas Inc., which ultimately falls under UBS Group AG, a company listed on the SIX Swiss Stock Exchange. 3 out of 4 board members of UBS Securities LLC are Chinese, at least one of whom appears to reside in Hong Kong, according to Bloomberg. UBS said it was one of the first international banks to have a local presence in China in the 1990s. In 2012, it formed the current company, UBS Securities Company Limited, which it says is the first foreign invested, fully licensed securities firm in China.
I will comment on this stuff here shortly. I want to let him get through all the foreign election stuff, but I will say this is one of the things where my perspective on the foreign aspect of the interference in our elections changed. I think it happened, but I think it's really difficult for any of us to point to a specific thing because I think it's multiple things. But I'll comment on that a little bit more once we get through this part.
There is also this article claiming a Swiss bank majority owned by Communist China paid Dominion parent company $400 million. Finally, this reporting from Catherine Herridge, stating Director of National Intelligence Jon Ratcliffe confirmed there was foreign interference in November elections. Report, epochtimes.com. DNI Jon Ratcliffe confirmed that there was foreign interference in the 2020 election, according to CBS correspondent Catherine Herridge. Quote, well, DNI Ratcliffe leads the 17 intelligence agencies, and he has access to the most highly classified information that is held by the U.S. government. And he told CBS News that there was foreign interference by China, Iran, and Russia in November of this year, and he is anticipating a public report on those findings in January, Herridge said on December 3rd. Let's put 2 and 2 together here. Dominion Voting Systems was part of the United States government's sanctioned advisory council that was responsible for election infrastructure security. The DHS knew they had a conflict of interest, yet let them operate without oversight. Multiple reports of financial ties between the Chinese Communist Party and Dominion. As the Epoch Times stated, quote, Dominion's voting technology is currently used in 28 U.S. states and Puerto Rico, according to the firm's official website. More than 40% of American voters cast their ballots through the Dominion voting system in general elections, including 65 of Michigan's 83 counties, all 159 counties in Georgia, and 2.2 million voters in Maricopa, Arizona's largest county, among others. The logical conclusion I come to is that China was able to bypass security measures that Dominion Voting Systems was responsible for implementing in order to access Dominion Voting Systems' own machines, resulting in the fraudulent outcome of this election. That is clearly an act of war, and our own Department of Homeland Security sanctioned it and then covered it up. Our only saving grace in all of this is the Space Force.
I kind of disagree with this as well. Maybe. I'll let him. We'll finish it out and then I'll comment again.
Our military could access those Maricopa County routers without subpoena. They have all the information they need, and they have likely had it since November 3rd, when they were monitoring it live. Trump didn't leave the security of our elections up to CISA and CISA alone. The military was watching. If devolution is not real, the only way to rectify this election will be through states decertifying their electors, something that has never been done and something I firmly believe will not work. The Biden administration completely disregarded the will of the American people by colluding with China to steal our election. They will obviously do anything they have to in order to stay in power. They will not cooperate with the decertification process and will not give up their grasp on power, even if every state decertifies. Devolution has to be real, because there is no other way we will ever rid ourselves of the corruption in our government. The best is yet to come.
All right. I agree with some of how I phrase that stuff. Some of the stuff my perspective has changed on. So when it comes to the convoluted nature of how all this stuff is set up, it's everywhere. It's not just our elections, but elections to me are the most impactful because of everything else it impacts. Like all the bullshit we're going through right now is because the election was stolen from Trump. And we can point to the CISA, the EIS subsector coordinating council, whatever, and how they have no oversight, financial conflict of interest. It's made up of all the machines and companies that participated in stealing the election. It's all bullshit. And that needs to change. But there's so many things need to change. When it comes to devolution, there's a body of circumstantial evidence, right? But there's so much about this we don't know. We don't know. You could point to, okay, there's foreign interference from China because Staple Street Capital is owned by Dominion, or you could point to, the ballot harvesting operations in Georgia. Was any of that money tied to, foreign entities? We don't know which of these was used as the justification. It could have been all of them. It could have been some of them. It could have been here or there. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, because one of the things that the immunity ruling proved to me was that the Supreme Court stood by Trump, that one of his official acts, and I think the quote they used was like, absolutely, one of his official acts as president and commander-in-chief is ensuring that our elections are secure. Like that is part of his duties, is upholding the rule of law and ensuring the security of our elections. I think how he did that, he definitely did something. How he did that, I don't know. And maybe we'll never know the specific details. But what I did say at the end here, which may have been a little exaggerated, whether it was Space Force or Cybercom or what, I don't know for sure. And I don't know if it matters. Maybe long term, if he ever has to show the evidence, it will matter. But if devolution is not real, if Trump did literally walk away from a stolen election and his plan to get back into office was simply, I'm going to rely on the same fraudulent election system that removed me from office to get me back in, I don't think that's going to work. I still stand by that. There's actually a comment on one of my Twitter posts the other day, I think it was yesterday even, where I was calling out the people with insider info. And I got a comment that was like, well, you literally said Trump was coming back before the midterms. People guess wrong. Okay. I mean, there's a difference between an opinion and guessing or insider info. But my thought process back then is those are fraudulent election system. Exposing the fraudulent election system would result in showing 2020 was stolen, and that would get Trump back in. I didn't know the method, whatever. That was my guess, because I couldn't logically process us going through a midterm election and having more seats stolen from our government. But that's what happened. And my thought process here is the same. Trump, I don't think Trump can get back into office unless our election system is exposed for the fraudulent nature that it is. unless there's some mass exposure of that, they're not just going to let Trump walk back in there. And that's the conundrum here. Either they steal it for Joe, which I think they basically are forced to steal it and at least try to get away with it again, but everybody will realize how fraudulent our election system is, and then it's game over. Or they do let Trump back in there, and this is something Chris talks about, and I think there's merit to it. They could let Trump win and kind of like downplay, okay, well, our elections are legitimate, Trump did win, but then steal down ballot and then obstruct and everything all along the way. I think it's more likely, if this is some sort of plan, which I believe it is, it is to expose the fraudulent nature of our elections. I think that's going to be part of it. I still stand by the fact that I don't think Trump can get back in there without our election system being exposed. At the time it was, he'll be put back in office because of 2020. Maybe this time he's put back in because 2024. I don't know, but I stand by that. And how Trump, whatever authority Trump used or justification, whatever method of stealing they used, there's definitely foreign aspects to it. It's likely financial. Maybe it is direct from Smartmatic. That's what he put in that draft executive order. I don't know. And I'm not going to claim to know, but we can speculate all day long. And sometimes that's where the fun of this comes from. So, yeah, guys, I do apologize. Like I said before, that it's been a while. I was hoping to do this every week. When I first started this, I don't even remember when my first episode was. Let me see if I can figure that out. When I first started this, I was like, yeah, this will be great. I'll do this every Sunday or, every Wednesday or whatever. And it hasn't quite worked out that way, but some things have changed on the personal side of things. And I want to give you guys an explanation as to why I'm going to do that over on Locals. So if you are subscribed over on Locals here, I'll stick around for a little bit before I have to go with my kids and kind of explain what's going on, do a little Q&A. I'm probably going to try to do another one of these, maybe even 2 of them next week. And so we'll get to part 7, which is a fun one. Part 7 is the one about foreign interference. So after everything I just said, that's what we're going to talk about next time I do this. And then part 8 is also a really fun one, the how and when, with the Dan Scavino tweet, about, someday I'll tell you what this was all about. And then how that was really from June 1st when the military got involved. I think there's some Mike Pence stuff in there. I mean, it's a pretty interesting article. So I'm excited to get to those. And then I get into my first 2 addendums, and then we go from there. But before we do any of that, I do want to get to a quick sponsor of of today's show. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up, and also make sure you guys tune into the Power Hour tonight. It should be a good one, as always. Let me see if I can get this to process here. I haven't done one of these in a little while over here on Rumble Studio, so I'm going to give it a go. All right, guys. It's time to say goodbye to Starbucks and say hello to Rumble's 1775 coffee. Unlike other brands, this is a coffee that backs free speech and is unapologetic about it. Visit 1775coffee.com. Use the promo code STUDIO to get 15% off. The coffee comes in medium and dark roast. It also comes in pea berry, which is similar to Kona coffee. In other words, this stuff is premium. Click the link in the live chat or in the description of this video. You can also go directly to 1775coffee.com and use promo code STUDIO to get 15% off today. And as always, we want to support those businesses that support free speech and support what companies like us here at Badlands are doing. So if you need some coffee, you can go to 1775coffee.com, use promo code STUDIO, and you can get 15% off, or click the link in the description of this video. And yeah, thank you. All right, guys, I'm going to head over to Locals now. So if you want to sign up over there, if you don't have to, but we'll do a little private chat with y'all. So see you guys there in a second if I can figure out how to do this.